Hey, welcome back to The Long Game. We are on a mission to demystify the science that shapes our lives and to unpack how great ideas built here in Scotland become real-world medicines, devices, and new companies at the cutting edge of life sciences. I'm Ross Kagan, Regis Professor of Precision Medicine at the University of Glasgow.
And welcome. I'm Sandy Weir, Tech Innovation Leader and Strategic Program Manager, joining you today from Edinburgh.
Hey, Sandy. How are you doing?
I'm good, thanks, Ross. It's a pleasure to see you again. I
Yeah,
guess you've been doing a bit of traveling, which we might come on to later, but it's nice to get together and get back around the microphones.
absolutely. Sandy, it's lovely to see you. On The Long Game, we explore the collisions of cells, code, and capital in the Scottish life sciences sector. A few episodes ago, you may remember, Sandy, we talked about cancer and it's being the number one cause of death in Scotland. And of course, I went through the whole list. So now let's going to go down that list. Today, we're going to talk about the disease that is arguably putting the most sustained, crushing pressure on both the Scottish population and the Scottish economy, cardiovascular disease.
Yeah, that's right, Ross. And if you remember, I thought heart disease was the top in that list at the time, but you're absolutely right. We're talking about heart disease, stroke, vascular conditions. We kind of group them together, and we often treat these as just an inevitable part of aging, especially here in Scotland. Of course, we got a terrible reputation for our poor dietary habits, but the scale of the problem is really staggering. And the commercial opportunity that we have is equally massive.
And it's actually something thought about when we moved to Scotland. We got hit with a lot of this discussion. So today, we look at the biology of the broken heart. We share some genuinely surprising data that shatters a few common myths and see how Scotland stacks up against the rest of the world. And we know that's going to go. And then Sandy's going to break down the sheer economic weight of this disease, how the Scottish biotech ecosystem is responding.
Indeed. So I get to say this today, Ross. We're going to put down your heart healthy tofu sausage roll and let's get right into it.
My
So
God, have you
let's
ever had a
start
tofu
with a
roll? Yes,
I don't know. I think I quite like tofu.
I
It's
do
not
too,
something
but
I would go to regularly, but
doesn't do
yeah,
good
good stuff.
sausage, though.
No, it's not a replacement. But let's start with the global picture, Ross. So we hear a lot. We talked about this before, of course, the Glasgow effect. We've thrown it around a bit in some of the other podcasts. How bad is the cardiovascular situation in Scotland compared to our closest neighbours?
Sandy, bad. Cardiovascular disease remains a leading cause of death across the European Union, actually accounts for about 1 in 3 deaths. But Scotland specifically has one of the highest death rates from coronary heart disease in Western Europe, which is what made those numbers for cancer and so on even more amazing. So if you look at the UK as a whole, the Glasgow city area, and you and I have seen these maps, right? We've talked about these, actually has the highest rate of premature mortality, meaning deaths under the age of 75 from cardiovascular disease in the entire UK. In fact, 5 of the top 10 worst performing areas for this metric are, that's right here in Scotland.
Yeah, that's a that's a tough statistic to swallow, and a kind of I've got that tofu sausage roll sticking in the back of my throat now. So, do you think is this purely a lifestyle issue, or is there something more to it?
Yeah, and this is also something that you and I have spoken a lot about with some real experts. It's a combination, of course, of legacy lifestyle factors, okay, some bad genetics, and but also very serious health inequalities, and you can see that in those maps if you just go street by street. So the deprivation gap is really insane. The gap in healthy life expectancy between the most and least deprived areas in Scotland is about 25 years for women and 26 years for men. That is just unacceptable. So GPs, general practitioners in our most deprived areas have about almost 1.5 times the number of male patients and 1.8 times, so almost double the number of female patients living with coronary heart disease compared to the least deprived areas.
Yeah, so it's staggering statistics, isn't it? You mentioned female patients in particular, and I think there's probably a huge public misconception about heart attack and in the middle-aged man and it being a middle-aged man's disease. What do you think of that?
Yeah, it is interesting because, of course, I always thought in those ways as well. And this really brings me to one of the most surprising and I think kind of craziest pieces of data that I found when I was researching this, which is that coronary heart disease kills more than twice as many women as breast cancer in Scotland. Yet, as you said, the myth is that it's a male disease. And I think in part because of that, women often ignore the symptoms. They statistically they present to the hospital later, and and again, you and I have seen this. They are historically underrepresented in clinical trials.
Yeah, no, that's a huge problem. But twice as many as breast cancer, that really will be quite staggering to a lot of people. It'll be a real surprise to a lot of people. But what about the other complications, right? Because heart disease, it doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens along with a lot of other what we call comorbidities.
Yeah, exactly. And here's another fact that sort of bridges your heart, your plumbing, and your brain. If you have a family history of coronary heart disease, you're much more likely to develop vascular dementia. And actually, we're going to talk about dementia, I believe, in our next podcast. In fact, vascular dementia, and my dad had this, so I do know a little bit about this. It accounts for three-quarters of all dementia cases in stroke survivors. So the blood vessels in your heart are the same system feeding your brain. You have problems with one, you really need to be careful about the other.
Yeah, indeed. And so, we have to think about these as an interconnected system, and that problem is really prevalent, and the cost of managing that must be really astronomical.
Absolutely. But I do want to give a shout out, and then I'm going to hand you the baton. I was doing a little more exploring into this. And of course, all roads lead to Scotland, of course. So in 1995, the West of Scotland Coronary Prevention Study, they tracked over 6,500 men and demonstrated that statins actually prevent heart attacks, even in people that don't have a history of cardiovascular disease. So in other words, this is the idea of putting statins in the water. So we now view statins as a cornerstone. I take a statin. I have no idea if you take one, but that sort of preventative cardiovascular care is really because of this Scottish cohort.
Yeah, great piece of work, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah. So, but let's flip this over to your domain, Sandy. Why don't you break down the economics? What does cardiovascular disease actually cost Scotland?
It's a great question. The numbers are as almost as hard to comprehend as the sort of the clinical situation that you've just described at a population level. The NHS annual expenditure specifically on cardiovascular disease in Scotland is estimated to be somewhere in the region of, and wait for it, 950 million pounds, Ross. But that's just the direct cost of the medical provision, the hospital beds, the surgeries, and the medications.
Yeah, well, what about the wider economy? Um, how about people who can't work, long-term disability? What about all of these?
Indeed. So when you put the human factors of loss and disability to one side, and you focus on the overall cost to the Scottish economy, then this starts to include the costs and considerations around premature death, loss of productivity, informal care, the total economic burden of all that in terms of singling out cardiovascular disease in Scotland is estimated to be something like 2.5 billion. That's every single year.
Wow, 2.5 billion. These numbers just seem like theoretical numbers, but that is quite a bit of money, and of course, that doesn't even talk about the suffering. I mean, to put that in perspective, that is actually a significant chunk of our national budget basically being drained out by a disease that in many cases is preventable or at least manageable if you catch it early enough.
Exactly. And this is why Scottish biotech and medtech sectors are really sort of pivoting hard towards precision medicine and early diagnostics. We just simply can't afford to keep treating late stage heart failure. We have to find a way to detect it before it becomes so advanced that the heart muscle starts to die. In radiology imaging, we focus a lot of our efforts on cardiovascular disease. So, in my own company, Canon Medical, we're constantly looking at ways on how to use advanced imaging to spot cardiovascular issues before they become a major health event. But it's happening in academia too, Ross. You were telling me about the new initiatives between our two cities.
Yeah, yeah. I know we were talking about this. It's actually a really nice example of the sort of wider Scotland ecosystem at work. So, University of Glasgow, we've joined a consortium with University of Edinburgh, and this has all been organized and funded by the British Heart Foundation. So, shout out to them to train the next generation of PhD researchers to basically find smart ways to catch these things early. So they're focusing specifically on the role of blood vessels in the development of heart attacks and strokes, because just like we talked about, plumbing is plumbing, whether it hits the heart or it's the brain or strokes, and we'll get into dementia next time. All of these things matter. So it's this sort of research. If we're going to basically get into that 2.5 billion, this is how you get both better health and, incidentally, to the point of our podcast, this is a great opportunity for the startups of tomorrow.
Yeah, and for the bio entrepreneurs listening, this is our best advice. The NHS doesn't want new pills. It's not looking for the miracle cure. They want real impact on structural cost savings. If you can build a digital health platform or an AI diagnostic tool that keeps a heart disease patient out of the emergency room, then you're helping to solve that £950 million problem that the NHS is facing today. So there's a clear clinical value, there's patient benefit, there's economic value right there. And if you have a compelling case for funding, then you should really be thinking in these terms. If you can provide something around the proof of concept or the prototype phase, then indeed you should be looking at how you can fund that. If you already have a market ready product, then you should be looking to bring that through our procurement process.
Yeah, I just want to take a moment to riff slightly on that because you make a really important point on this advice, which is, and I'm going to jump on my hobby horse for just a few sentences, I promise. As a researcher, of course, I'm always looking for the cure, for the really spectacular move on these diseases. It's got to be the case, and I would love to see somebody found an a institute that's sole purpose is to use smart, high technology to drive costs down, not necessarily to dramatically improve things, but to take the same thing and make it much less expensive because you've smarted your way forward. And I know there's individual examples of that, but to really set up a structure to do that, that would be the way that you could both shift from reactive medicine to precision medicine, but also catch the attention of these national healthcare systems that are always having to think about, cost, value, benefit. And I think driving down that cost can change that momentum, and that would be a great opportunity for companies. So what do
I
you
think
think,
you're
Sandy?
absolutely right, Ross. And we spend a lot of time looking and searching for the really novel, impactful, high technology solution. Whereas I think what we're seeing now is a real shift towards understanding how we can apply technologies like AI to improve productivity and efficiency, to make these really significant cost reductions. So if you combine that with the ability to detect disease early and using new methods to detect disease early, really squeezing the delivery of those systems, delivering care in a more timely fashion, then yeah, you were really starting to shift the dial in terms of those costs that we described in the pod today. 950 million, 2.5 billion cost per year to the Scottish economy. Yeah, that's a lot of grant money for you, Ross.
Yeah, we know it's interesting. Ooh.
What
I'll
could you
take
do
it.
with 2.5 billion?
Um, that's another podcast. Um, um, but we talked about this, right? Which is when we talked about AI and its use in the NHS, they could use it for anything, but what they're actually using it for is to drive down costs. And so I think the biggest impact of AI for the next few years, I don't know, maybe you agree or maybe you disagree, will actually not be to come up with cool new ways to listen to, an ambulance or a 911 call and track heart disease. That's pretty cool. But the real use of it is going to be to take what they do now and drive that cost down by upping efficiency. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to get so much news coverage when we
Right.
look at those productivity improvements. But undoubtedly, you can see that's where the attention is now starting to focus, and I think it's really sensible, and I think that's where we are going to see considerable reductions in the amount of money that we have to set aside for these types of things for being able to treat our cardiovascular problem. But really, Ross, this all starts right at the beginning. As responsible members of our population, you really need to make healthy choices. So let's cut down on the number of sausage rolls. I feel like we're adding to that in this podcast. Let's improve our diet and
There's some
let's
things that make life worth living.
yeah, we're going to come to that when we get to our little moment of joy today.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So Ross, so you maybe you've got some final words of wisdom in terms of practical advice. As a scientist, what would you say?
Sure. Well, the first thing I would say as a scientist is instead of putting down your sausage rolls, put down YouTube. Put down the people who are talking about all these things that are going to help your heart, be heart healthy and all that stuff. First of all, most of them are not scientists, and as I often point out to my beleaguered doctor friends, doctors do what scientists tell them to do. Um, so if there's not scientific data behind it, please ignore it. There's so much amazing junk out there. So it's really back to the basics is what it comes down to. And I wish I could say, take this supplement. In fact, I wish I was selling that supplement. But that's not what we're about in the long game. So from a biological standpoint, know your numbers. All right. I know my numbers. I'm pretty sure you know yours. Know your so blood pressure, cholesterol. These are the famous silent killers, and it's 2026. They are still the silent killers. Nothing has changed. You can feel perfectly fine while your arteries are just getting narrower and narrower. So get checked, especially if you have a family history, which I do. And we want to really emphasize that if you're a woman, please remember the statistics that we just discussed. There's nothing magical about staying off of this if you're a woman. In fact, the data means you're at a higher risk. So please get checked and do it regularly. I just got my numbers checked yesterday, actually. So putting that out there. From an ecosystem standpoint, we need to lean into Scotland's incredible health data. I think we've talked a little bit about it. I've had a lot of people come back to me like, got 3 cards? I had no idea, this sort of thing. So we're going to open up more and more of those vaults. There is a lot of health data here in Scotland. We have electronic health records. We can track cardiovascular outcomes across decades, which is really amazing. So a lot of countries are just getting started in the last few years. They don't have decades, which in terms of heart disease is actually required. And in terms of startups, we really need to make those more available, and they need to leverage that data. So if you can't leverage it today, come to one of the universities. We're generally considered the honest brokers, and we can at least help you, guide you towards the safe havens. And you can use those to, for example, train better predictive algorithms or whatever it is that you think is a smart idea with your company. What do you think, Sandy?
Yeah, and I agree, and definitely on that point, no supplements. That's not you're listening to the wrong podcast if you're expecting advice on
We should do
supplements.
a podcast on supplements.
And unfortunately, like you, Ross, I also have this in my family history, so I've got to be incredibly careful around this as well. But if I think about my advice from the tech side, my most important piece of advice would be don't build your product in a silo. Successful cardiovascular health tech companies, certainly in this day and age, are the ones that are partnering directly with clinicians that are seeking deep engagement and understanding of the healthcare needs. So the final words from me would be clear that you understand your customers' needs, know the impact that your technology or solution is trying to generate, and understand the value of that.
Yeah, I'm still reeling
It's
over
never
you
my final
taking my
word, Ross.
sausage roll away from me. And I was thinking, I can't remember the proper name, but there's a new type of job, or at least newly labeled type of job that the AI companies and so on are using. And that is basically a coder that you send out to your clients, and they embed themselves into the company and work with them to develop software. Then they bring that ability back into back into their original company. And something like that, I think, would be really helpful if you could find a way to embed yourself into your client, whether it's a healthcare worker or so on, or find somebody who deals with, like I work with doctors who are in the hospital all the time, and they patiently explain to me what it is they actually need. It's really changed the type of work we do in my lab and in my institute. So I think that's really good. I think it's words of wisdom, basically. I think it's really smart.
Oh, thank you, Ross. That's really kind.
So, despite your attack on my sausage rolls, um, as usual, we are going to not leave this in a negative tone, the negative being removal of sausage roll. Um, it's time for a closing segment, a wee bit of joy, always my favorite.
Yeah, indeed. We spend so much time looking at these sort of big problems, Ross. It's important to flip back and think again about the sort of small wins that we managed to achieve as well. So tell me, Ross, what's been your wee bit of joy this week?
So for my wee bit of joy this week, so as you mentioned, I was traveling, and I want to talk about this recent trip. So it was a trip to Japan and then over to New York City, and it was all about family, visiting mainly our moms. My mom's in Philadelphia, my wife's mom is in Kobe. And today I want to talk about Kobe, and then next time we'll talk about New York. So we go to Kobe every year. Sorry, my wife goes more often, but I go with her annually. My brother-in-law and his family usually join us. Hopefully next time our daughters will come along. And this time we spent a day downtown. Most of the time we spent with her mom, but this time we spent a day downtown, and we explored an emerging alternative shopping region just south of the Monomachi station, which is really quite south, right near the water in Kobe. So for those of you who don't know the sort of basic layout, and maybe you don't know as much about Kobe, I always think of it as, so if you start with Tokyo, that's more east, and you come on over, there's three cities that form a triangle, and they're all about an hour away from each other on the train, which is Kyoto, Osaka, Kobe. So we're in Kobe, and they have very distinct feels to them. Kyoto's famous for being very beautiful and very ancient. Osaka is sort of second city behind Tokyo, so it's much more urban. And then Kobe is more, I would say, um, blue collar town. They're all reasonably large cities.
Yeah, nice. It sounds really nice, Ross. And I have to confess that before we started recording today, we were talking about this, and for about 10 minutes, I thought I thought you were talking about Kyoto, and of course, I got Kyoto and Kobe completely mixed up. So it's lovely to hear more about this. I've been to Osaka. I've been lucky enough to visit Osaka. It is a really lovely area. Um, yeah. So tell us a bit more. What's the vibe like down there?
Yeah, I really love it, actually. So now we're talking again about the sort of the bottom of Kobe, the south bit of Kobe near the water. It's an area, it's got very well preserved early 20th century stone shipping offices, got old brick warehouses. So it's got that vibe to it. Um, it's really dialed down from its shipping days, but you can see that it was a big shipping port at some point. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Glasgow and its shipbuilding. But I think it's fared much better. But now that area has really been turned into a hub for independent Japanese designers. And Sandy, as you know, my wife and I really like to do more alternative stuff, and so this is our vibe, right? So if you wander down the corridors are very narrow, and you go into the upper floors of these buildings, these really old buildings that they've converted. They're so cool. They really hide these funky boutique shops. You have stationery stores, you have independent multi-brand ateliers, you have artisan leather workshops, it's the sorts of things you always see in Japan, right? You have all these specialized, coffee bars. Like, my favorite one is that they have coffee and bagels, and I and they sell the coffee as, roasted, so they don't sell coffee coffee, it's just beans. So I actually walked in there and said, "Can I have a bagel?" And they said, "Only if you buy a bag of coffee." I'm like, "Well, I'm visiting. I have nothing to do with this bag of coffee." And then the guy actually refused to sell me bean the bagel because I wasn't buying the coffee. I'm like, "Okay." So it's so Japanese.
Yeah,
Basically, this is pretty far away from there's a central commercial area. It's pretty close to it physically, but it's pretty far away in terms of the vibe.
sounds fascinating, and it's lovely to hear that a little bit more about it. A lot of people that might be listening, if they've not been to Japan, they might not be aware of how important coffee is in Japanese culture, and they make incredible coffee. It sounds like the perfect place to browse and to pick up some really unique things, Ross.
Yeah, yeah, as you say. Yeah, so we did get some small gifts, uh, for friends and family. For example, we went there from there to New York. Our in-laws, who are just amazing people, we wanted to thank them for putting us up, in New York City, so we had gifts for them and their grandkids and so on. Um, and I really like first I thought this is kinda weird. So you've done this, gone to Japan many times, and Japan, China, and so on, and they give these little gifts. And at first I'm like, "This is kinda weird," but I kinda like it now. And, it's really just a lovely feature of Japanese culture. And, as a scientist, I've actually traveled a wild amount a bit. If I said how much, it would frankly be bragging. And I've always loved this because I always go to a different place, go to a new place. But what I wanted to bring up here as my wee bit of joy is that I'm beginning to appreciate the beauty of just sinking deeper into an area. So we go back to Kobe every year, year after year. And it's not so much that it's a super exciting city, it's just getting to know its vibe. I really kind of like this. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. I completely get that, and I guess it's when you get that level of familiarity where you're traveling to somewhere that you go in frequently, but you go frequently enough to start to know the place, and then you really start to understand and discover where the real kind of hidden gems are that are in that district.
Yeah. And I'm babbling on, so I'm gonna get to just one more other point I wanted to say, and then I'll hand over the baton. And that is, so, like, as you say, there's all these lovely places. Japanese are very into jazz, things like that, and there's these jazz bars, and someday I'll talk about a really magical one that my wife and I found. It was, like, on the 3rd floor, and they had this incredible sound system for this little tiny bar that I could almost touch both walls with my reaching out. Um, but I did wanna finish by talking about, this guy, Craig Maud. He's a blogger, my wife turned me on to him. He writes very beautifully about the little details in Japan, so he obviously loves Japan. And he brings up these things which we see all around, which I have now grown to love, called kisaten or kisa. These very dark, nostalgic, mom and pop coffee shops or little food shops. The mom and pops, they run these been running these for decades. I'm pretty sure you've probably seen these sorts of things. There's a particular type called a jazz kisa, which again, they only do like vinyl records, and they have these incredible sound systems in these little tiny places. You're not there to like talk or chat. You just hang out there, you drink your coffee, and you just listen to it. It's just kind of the zen of just getting into the whole thing. It's a lovely culture of just appreciating the music, listening to the music, just kinda being there with the music and everybody. So, I would say that's what brought me joy this week. What about you,
Yeah,
big guy?
yeah, no, that sounds beautiful. I love the way you've described all that, and it's creating a bunch of mental pictures in my mind that really, I think I can identify with it. It sounds very tranquil, actually. Unfortunately for me, my,
Not so
my,
tranquil?
my, my wee bit of joy this week, not quite so tranquil. No, well, I took part in the Edinburgh Marathon Festival, and I'm Honestly, if my PE teachers could hear me talking about this now, they would they'd be rolling and laughing because I used to hate things like cross country. But I did the half
You
marathon
did the half
back at
marathon. Wow.
half marathon back at the end of May, and sorry, it reminded me of why I really love these events, the Edinburgh Marathon Festival events that they put on. I'm very lucky. I've been doing the sort of 10K events since since I got started to go and get involved in it back in 2014. I honestly don't know how long this Edinburgh Marathon Festival's been going on. There was a short break around the COVID era when, obviously they couldn't do the events, but I've been a big fan of this, and it's a weekend festival. It just seems to grow bigger and bigger. The entire city seems to show up, so the crowds, when you're running, the crowds really kind of carry you on. And for a couple of hours, well, actually it was more like nearly 3 hours for me. You feel part of something bigger, and that noise really carries you through. And you've done running, Ross. You kind of
I
know
have.
what I mean, right?
Yeah.
So if
It's definitely, yeah, it's, as you say, it's like the whole scene. You're kind of all in it together.
Yeah,
I know what you
exactly.
mean. Yeah.
It gives you that sort of camaraderie that you've all got a common purpose. But you imagine the scene. The scene is awesome, right? So we've just set off, and we're running through central Edinburgh. If you know central Edinburgh, you've got this high part of the city. You're coming down from the castle. There's the
Yeah. It's quite a
mound where
run.
the Bank of Scotland is, and you can
Yeah.
see the crowd. Because I'm starting in roughly in the last third of this convoy of people. But I can see that the runners in front kind of snaking down the mound along Princes Street, which is the main sort of thoroughfare in Edinburgh. They would go down past the Parliament building. It's an absolutely awesome sight. And it was a beautiful sunny day. And I really just had to pinch myself and think, well, how lucky am I to be part of this? And the run, it takes you down to the coast, so out towards Musselburgh, something like 13.1 miles or 21.4 kilometers. And I've got to give a big shout out to my running partner, Danny Johnston. If Danny's listening, I'm not sure if he is. He's been very kind about the podcast, so maybe he's listening today. Anyway, Danny's an ultra athlete, and he's done loads of these sort of incredible events, the Dragon's Back, the Cape Wrath Ultra, and these are real big endurance events, 100K plus, over like 24, 48 hours. And he was a great support. I've got to say, he really managed to get me through it, stuck with me most of the way. And I'll definitely be forever grateful for him for that little bit of encouragement he gave me. It's the furthest I've ever run for sure. But congratulations to all those that took part. It was an awesome event, and I'm already enthusiastic and excited about taking part again next year. A lot of people take part for charity, Ross. So you see a lot of people supporting a lot of the kind of conditions that we talk about on pods. British Heart Foundation, Dementia UK, Alzheimer's UK, uh, Heart and Stroke, you name it, there's people there running. It's enormously uplifting from that perspective as well. So, yeah, some proper long game energy was required. And as I say, I'm looking forward to running again next year.
Wow. That's amazing. I'm so impressed. I just have two things on that, and then we can wrap up. One, to your buddy, Johnston,
Danny.
Danny, Danny
Yeah.
Johnston. I challenge you to run the Barkley marathons, then I'll be impressed. Okay. Enough of this ultra marathon. Let's get serious here, Danny. And secondly, my question to you is, were they playing bagpipes at any point while you're running through the, because they're always playing bagpipes in Edinburgh, right?
It's quite possible. Do you know, confessions, right? I had my earpods in, and I had a
Right.
really
Of
good
course.
soundtrack that I put together. But actually, I had to, about halfway through, I had to take my pods out because I wanted to hear the crowd, and there was so much great support. But I didn't
Sure.
actually hear anyone at that point playing the bagpipes.
Because I don't know
But I
why,
was
but that
delirious
seems
by
like
that
that
point.
would, yeah. So, all right, this is lovely. So this brings us to the end of the today's episode, and we just want to just a quick rehash, which is remember heart disease. It's not just a medical issue, and check those numbers. It's an economic one. Check those numbers. In Scotland, we do have the tools to fight back. We just need to get those tools, and we need to get young entrepreneurs to get those tools, all the data we have, patient data, and so on, and make those work. What do you think, Marathon Man?
Yeah, great words of wisdom there. But don't wait for us to form these solutions. Get out there and do some exercise as well. Keep the heat, and the best of luck playing the long game.
Excellent. See you, Sandy. See you, everybody.
See
Ciao.
you, Ross. Thanks.
Yeah, see the vision clear. We're here to run the long game. Blueprint set, no fear. Playing out the long game.